Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Monday, April the 8th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I am joined better late than never by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Ruhnke. JT, our last episode, I opened with, wow, look at how on time we are. I'm sure this will be a trend. And then I went and did it. I think I've the latest I've ever possibly been. I'm sorry to you. I'm sorry to our listeners. This was not me just dilly-dallying around. I was traveling back to my house, and this was as early as I just got back. I just ran in the door and fired up the computer. You don't care about the story, but it happened. But we're here now. We're going to talk about tackles. Aren't you happy that I'm here? Aren't you happy to see me?
We're going to talk about defensive tackles, that is.
Right.
The tackles of the defensive variety, yes. Happy Monday. I guess there's a big eclipse going on if you're listening to this on the day after we go live with it. I guess there's a big eclipse going on, which is also apparently the total
look up
end of
and
the
look
world.
Directly at it with your naked eyes for
exactly.
as long as
That's
you can.
That's what I will
muster.
be doing tomorrow.
Do not do that. No, do not do that.
But yeah, I guess that's cool. I guess
it's very cool. Have you? So a couple years ago, was it 2018? We had a big eclipse in the U.S.
Yeah, this is my second eclipse, so I guess I'm lucky. I guess I don't know.
Well, for most of us, it's our second one. But like, were you here in Nashville at that time? Because Nashville had totality. No. So you didn't see totality then.
No.
You know what it was? Like 80%, 90%?
Yeah, it was like 80, 90-ish%. Okay. So like
that's what we're gonna see here in Nashville, apparently. I don't even have my glasses yet for it, but I learned that apparently here free shout, I guess. If you go to Sonic tomorrow and order their Eclipse special drink, it's a special drink then you get free glasses with it. So if you're looking for glasses, that's the way to do it. Go to Sonic tomorrow morning and ask for the Eclipse thing. So we're talking about defensive tackles today. And we had some late-breaking defensive tackle news that we'll get to later in the episode. Not great news, but it sure is news, and we'll talk about it. We're going through our top 10 positional series here on the show. This is our second of 11. Let me check. Yeah, 11. We have 11 positions to do. This is number 2. If you missed the first one, it was the top 10 tight ends in this class. And frankly, you didn't miss a ton. You missed the top 3 or 4 guys we talked about who are very good players. But the riffraff in the tight end class, not the greatest. A stronger group of individuals here on the defensive tackle side of things. So after today's pod, if you missed the first one, go back, check it out. It should be the last episode, most recent episode in the feed if you're watching on podcast or on YouTube. JT, the top 10 guys in this class are all going to go within the first, checking here, within the first like 115-ish slots in this draft. At least that's how it's projected by the consensus draft board. And so you and I have gone through and put together our top 10 lists. You want to just go ahead and dive right into it and get into numbers 10 through 6?
Yeah, I think we can. I think obviously while we do this series, there is still going to be Titans things just on the back burner. As always, we can touch on, hey, the Titans keeping their options open in the first round, I guess, before we get things started. They're meeting with J.C. Latham this week.
Oh, horror. Don't tell certain folks about that. They get all hot and bothered when the idea of J.C. Latham in Nashville. We are not those folks, but there are some of them.
And then also as well, Malik Neighbors is meeting formally with the Titans, which puts another couple of, I guess, top 30s on their list now, so that this list continues to grow as we get closer and closer to the draft.
And with Neighbors, pointed out by our buddy Zach over at Football and Other F Words, this is their third official meeting with him. They had an official meeting with him at the Combine, of which I think you only get 40, if my memory serves. Then they met with him over dinner before his pro day down in Louisiana last month, and now they are meeting with him at the facility. So clearly they are very interested in him were he to fall to 7. I don't know, JT, does that alone change your mind about where you think they're at? Do you think they would forego their top tackle on the board for a Malik Neighbors? We'll talk more about this, obviously, when we get to the wide receiver episode, but I think he's probably the number one guy in my head. Not that I would do, but just trying to read the tea leaves. He's the number one guy for me that would not surprise me were he on the board. They went with him over a tackle.
For sure. And I think that the only real possibility of Malik Neighbors being available at 7 would be because some of the other tackle options are already off the board, like a Joe
Right.
Alt or an Olu
That's
Fashanu.
fair.
Like,
That's fair.
I
The
think
odds of there being a Joe Alt and a Neighbors at 7, not super high.
I think for sure, even with the potential of 4 quarterbacks in the first 6 picks baked in, you still have a team like the Chargers who could continue to take Joe Alt, as that has been buzz ever since Jim Harbaugh became the head coach in LA, and then also another wild card spot. Could Brock Bowers shoot up there? And then I'll always have to see where Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to potentially be in this puzzle piece of a first 7 or 8
Right.
picks here. So I think there would have to be a lot of things currently moving around for the Titans to be able to draft Malik Neighbors at 7, because I think the hype is real as when we get to the wide receiver episode. I think it's not so cut and dry anymore who is the consensus de facto wide receiver 1.
Right. No, I agree. The last thing that we can touch on before we get into the actual players we're talking about today, from a Titans specific perspective on this defensive tackle group, tight ends, not really a position of need for the Titans, despite what PFF thinks the Titans need. Not really super high on their list. Defensive tackle is up there. I mean, it's, right now it's offensive tackle, it is edge, it is linebacker, and then you kind of get to defensive linemen, right? And depending on how you value those guys and what you think of what the Titans have, which is Jeffrey Simmons and a bunch of guys you probably don't recognize unless I were to tell you their name, like, it's a big position of need for them. So I would imagine the odds of one of these guys being a future Tennessee Titan is relatively high.
I would agree. I don't foresee the tandem of Jeffrey Simmons and Sebastian Joseph Day playing every single snap for 17 games straight.
I forgot Sebastian. That's fair. People would know his name.
I think it would be tough for them to play every single snap on the defensive side of the ball. You're going to have people rotating in there, and that's where a bunch of these rookies in depth can come in. And I agree with you, whether it is in the later rounds or maybe even targeting right there at the beginning of day 3. I think that's where you could probably potentially start to see some of these guys become maybe possibly future Titans.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's dive into the 10 guys. And I've not seen your list. You've seen mine because you prepared the slides. I don't know how similar our lists are, but let's go through. Do we have a slide for our number 10 through 6, or do we not? Or how?
We don't. No.
Okay, sorry, I just got here, so this is stuff I should have talked to you about in the pre-production meeting. So do we want to list out our 10 through 6, or do you want to just start with my 10th? Or
yeah, let's start with your 10, and then I can add my my opinion onto it afterwards.
Fair enough. Okay, so my number 10 guy in this class is DeWayne Carter, defensive lineman out of Duke. He is on the consensus board, I believe, at number 111 overall. And the reason why I put him in here, he's 6'3", 305. He's got the right size. He's a redshirt senior. He's not a super elite athlete, not a super elite presence on tape, but he is versatile and he's really smart. And what I've read about his football intelligence and leadership ability, multi-year captain at Duke, three times actually he was a captain. He's just got a strong rotational floor profile for a player. Where in terms of defensive line strategy, I'm somebody that likes the model that we saw from the Buffalo Bills a couple of years ago, where they had kind of the hockey shifting rotation, where you could just throw serviceable rotational level players, throw fresh bodies at the interior of the line, and kind of just shell the guard, center, guard trio over and over and over. And that tends to pay dividends as you get later into the game and they start to wear down. And so DeWayne Carter is the kind of prospect that I see as being really useful in that way. Is he going to be a Jeffrey Simmons style elite? You have to game plan for him in the center. No, that's not really what he is. But what he does offer you is really high IQ, strong leadership, strong, from what I've read, a strong human being you want in your locker room. And he's got very well-rounded traits that I think are going to lend to him being a good rotational piece for a team.
Yeah, I a lot of the same things in my research of DeWayne Carter. He is my defensive lineman number 8, so I'm a little bit higher on him than maybe you are. The big thing for me was his versatility. In some of the tape, I really watched him play both on the outside and inside, so he has that kind of two-way versatility. Whether he's better at one or the other, I think he is more of that defensive lineman in the middle type of guy who is run stuffing at his peak. That is where he's the best
Right.
in his game. But he did have some experience on the outside playing at Duke, like you said, captain for all 3 years at Duke. And he lacks the power. That I think that's going to be a big word that when we talk to you about these guys today, is that a lot of them are strong and a lot of them have a lot of power. Dwayne Carter is not one of those guys who has that A tier, A plus power, which I think is one of my concerns when thinking about him as an every down starter. I agree with you. I don't think he is, but I think that, like you said, if you play him for a series or two at a time, he can give you those bursts to kind of set the field on fire and be that game-wrecking playmaker that you need, even though you can't rely on him every single snap and every single drive. Now, like you said, when we're looking at this from ranking these guys, of course, as a human being and as a person, he'd probably be 1 or 2 on the list. And there's a certain someone who would probably be now at the bottom of this list given today's things. But that's not what we're going off of today. But like you
we're
said,
looking at the players, not the person today.
111. Right. I think that if they were to meet or did meet with Dwayne Carter and they liked what they saw and what they heard from him in their meeting at the NFL Combine, if they did meet with him, this is a guy who I could see in the building right now as a kind of a first early into this rebuild of the defense, a guy who they're going to flip in and out with guys like Jeffrey Simmons and Sebastian Joseph Day. And I think that he could work really well.
All right. Who'd you have at number 10?
My number 10 is Brandon Dorlus, who I believe is your number 8. So we can just flip flop there.
Sure.
Brandon Dorlus, man, I don't know. I don't know what people see in him. I see a lot more cons than I do pros with a guy like Brandon Dorlus. He's my number 10 because I think he.
Well, clearly you saw enough positive to put him number 10 on your list, right?
And I was about to say he's barely makes my list because out of the other guys who I could probably put on this list, he at least is refined, playing at a Power 5 school, playing in the Pac-12 at that last year. I mean, he has some of the technical ability to, I think, become a rotational player eventually. But there just wasn't, I did not see a lot of power in his game either. He's a guy who when I was watching some of the tape, it's one of those where my eyes were telling me one thing, and then you look at a lot of the other stats, and if you go to like a PFF and look at his grade, you see a totally different thing. To me personally, when I'm watching him, especially in the conference championship against Washington, I mean, against that really good Washington line, he was getting bodied every single time. And I was not really pleased with what I saw from him. I know right now on the consensus big boards, he's around 80 or so. I just don't see him as a current day 2 prospect for me. Some other things that I really think that really turned me off to someone like a Brandon Dorlus, just he was very much, when he would get double teamed, it was almost like he kind of give up in some of these plays and not have another second move or another step to maybe continue fighting in the rep. And that's something that just really wasn't sitting with me well. And I think that's why he does make my list, because I think he does have some of the technical talent to make it at the next level. But it's a hard road for me to see him making it as an every down starter in this league.
He's my number 8. Like you said, 80th on the consensus board, which for reference, I want to give people a better idea of this. That's a late day 2 pick. The reason I'm a little bit higher on him than you are, and I agree with a lot of those downsides, I don't see him as an every down player either. But the pass rush upside that he presents, I think, is strong enough to make him worth a pick. I don't know necessarily if I agree with the idea of picking him on day 2. I would be much more comfortable with him early day 3 in that 4th round. Had a 10.5% pass rush win rate in college, which is very strong. His run defense is fine, but as those true pass set rushing snaps, he's showing off his best there, and he's more of a cleanup artist than anything. He's not the one necessarily getting in for the sacks, only 4 sacks and 7 hits last year, but 35 hurries. So gets after the quarterback and affects the play, which is what ultimately matters. That's upside that you're not going to find in a whole lot of guys late day 2, early day 3 on the interior. And that's the reason why I think he's worth the dart throw.
Yeah, I think you're right there where it's, the production is just enough there, in his game to the point where I think that he's going to get a shot. Now, if he can make something of himself, I think that could be something, but it's going to have to come in a hurry, right? Because I think this is also where you start to put age into the factor, right? He's 23. He's one of the older guys in this
He is older.
class. So,
Yeah.
it's how much of that technique can you teach in a hurry for me personally.
So my number 9 defensive tackle in this class is Mekhi Wingo out of LSU. He is 295, 6'1". It was a junior last year. The reason why I don't have him higher is some of his athletic and physical limitations. He's got shorter arms. He's just not the longest player in the world. So that's limiting in terms of his versatility. But what he does is win quickly, and he does that really well. He's got a lot of things going for him as a pass rusher as well. Pretty well rounded. If you look at his PFF grades, strong pass rush and run defense grade, but his win rate is relatively high. His run stop rate is what really is knocking him. And part of that is just due to his size. He's not a run stuffer. He's not a space eater in the middle of the line. Only 3.4% on his run stop rate last year. But he had surgery last year and missed some of his playing time in 2023. Part of me wonders if that contributes to him not being higher on some folks' boards, having more tape to examine and not having to deal with a surgery in the middle of the season. I just liked what I saw on the tape that I watched, and when I look at the athletic testing and besides the length issues, I see a guy that is perfectly capable of being a rotational player in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's my number 7th prospect. So I think you're 7 and you're 9th, my 7th. He's my 7th, and then
so why'd you like him a little bit better?
He's strong, man. He sees the game really well and has the technical prowess to, despite not be that big of a run stuffer, still get after the quarterback and cause chaos. And he was one of my favorite players to watch because when I'm looking at this, I'm already thinking ahead to, well, you're going to put him next to a superstar in Jeffrey Simmons, looking at it from a Titans lens, right? Who is someone who I think could really succeed in this new look defense. And Mekhi Wingo is one of those guys. I think with how young he is and how long he could use to develop, he's a good guy that I think, like you said, you could put in a rotational place with a bunch of other players like Sebastian Joseph Day and a couple other depth pieces, and you could have a really good starter on your hands down the line. 21 years old, like you said, super strong and uses his force correctly, where I think a lot of some of these other players on this list, when I was watching their tape, were struggling in some double coverage to use their hand placement and their force correctly. With Mekhi Wingo, I think he is a very technically refined player, and it's just taking some more of those steps in certain schemes to make him into that better player. So he was one of my guys that I think when you look at that early day 3 pick, if the Titans were interested, I think they could go with a guy like Mekhi Wingo. He's one of the guys that I'd keep my eye on for the Titans.
And based on the consensus draft board, he's expected to be an early day 3 prospect. Now, I'm doing the math here, and there must be a guy on your list, JT, that you have that I don't, and I'm curious as to who that is. I'm going to have you tell us here in just a moment, but before we do, got to sell the show a little bit. So guys, if you're watching with us live today on a Sunday evening, we appreciate you being here and spending a little bit of your weekend with us. A couple of things you can do for us to help us out even further. We already love that you're here, but if you make sure you're watching on YouTube, that's Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, leave Twitter, leave Facebook, go to the YouTube page, because there you can be a part of the conversation like Tim and D-Good and Brian and AJ already are. A lot of you guys asking about the T'Vondre Sweat news. Yes, we saw it. We're going to talk about it when we get to T'Vondre Sweat, who is much higher on our boards. As to whether or not he falls from this, I'd imagine he does, and we'll probably speculate as to how far here in a little bit. So hang tight, and we will get to T'Vondre Sweat, who we both like a lot as a prospect, and we're disappointed to see the news about today. A couple of other things. Again, if you're not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you are. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube page, Broadway Sports Media on YouTube, if you're watching live, it's right there. It's a button right below the video. It's red. Make it turn. I think it turns white when you subscribe. Do that. It's very helpful. It's free to you. It's very helpful to us. So make sure you're subscribed. Trying to get that follower count up as much as possible. And then, of course, follow us on social media at Hot and Read Pod on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. Okay, JT. So who is this gentleman you have on your list? Can I take a guess? I genuinely do not know. I have not seen your list.
Sure.
because I'm gonna guess it's the guy that I was pained to not have on my list, and that was Christian Boyd. Is it Christian Boyd on your list?
It is, and
Okay.
actually,
He's my
mostly
11, and I'm probably gonna
because
end up finding a
yeah.
way to put him in the 10 by the end of it because I like Christian Boyd a lot.
um Christian Boyd is currently an honorable mention for me because when I was
Oh,
looking at the list and the consensus boards, you know how they kind of misrepresent players in
sure.
positions. So,
Yeah,
I Makai Wingo was misrepresented on a couple of the boards, and I was like, oh, I
I
forgot
see.
about him.
They had him listed as an
So,
edge.
yeah, so I had to put him in. But before that, I'm with you. Christian Boyd was my number 10. Um, I really liked what I saw on tape, and I think I'm a little higher on him than a lot of other people are. He had career highs this year in a lot of different stats. In his sacks, he was tied his career high with 3 sacks, 28 hurries last year for UNI. He's a guy that I think has a nice build, and when we saw him at the combine, I think he tested really well. Super athletic guy,
Mhm.
who I really enjoyed watching at the combine, also getting to listen to. He's one of those guys who I think is actually going to go a lot not earlier, later than I think
He should.
he should, and I think he could be a really good value pick for the Titans if they were to look at him maybe in the 5th or 6th round.
If he's available in the 5th, I love a Christian Boyd. The reason why ultimately I didn't have him on my list is because there's a little bit of a boom bust element to him. His upside is really, really
He's
delicious.
just, but also he's old, like one
Right.
of the oldest guys in the class.
He's one of the oldest guys in the class. He was a redshirt senior last year, 6'4", 317 pounds. But man, what he does as a not just a what's the word I'm looking for? One-dimensional player on the inside. He is somebody that could eventually develop into a 3-down player just because of what he does so well in the run game and as a pass rusher. He has that versatility. I'd imagine he comes into the NFL and is played in a rotational role at first, but I love the upside with him. I just don't see a super strong floor because of the age, because of playing at not the best competition, playing with the Northern Iowa Panthers. By the way, if people don't know what UNI is, he played at University of Northern Iowa. Those things concern me enough to have him at 11. But boy, the best that he has to offer on tape, I'm really fond of.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then we can move on to your number 7. So looking
Sure.
at the board right now, you had at number 10, Dwayne Carter, number 9, Wingo, 8, Brandon Dorless, and 7 is Michael Hall Jr. Now, this is a guy who is my 9th. So me and you on
Okay.
Makai Wingo and Michael Hall, we flip-flop just like we did
There
with
we
the
go.
other two at 8 and 10. What did you see in Michael Hall's game? Because I think we had a conversation earlier today while we were doing these lists. I think we have very different opinions of Michael Hall.
I like Michael. So Michael Hall, defensive lineman out of Ohio State, 280, 6'2", much smaller guy, but that presents some versatility, I think, inside and out. His measurements are what keep him lower on this board for me, and I'd imagine that's why he's even lower on yours. He's not going to work in every scheme. He's not going to work across the entire line, but he is one of the youngest players in the class, only 20 years old. He's not long enough to like be a 3-4, 4-3 D end. But I do think he can be a full-time D tackle with the athleticism that he has, despite his frame. Very, very quick and has strong finesse as a pass rusher. I liked a lot of what I saw. Some of the raw numbers stand out, like eye popping. Pass rush win rate of 18.3% is really, really strong. 22 hurries in his final year at Ohio State, 2 sacks, 5 hits. Not sacrificing as a run defender either. Well above average, 7.3% run stop rate. A very slightly above average PFF grade for his run defense grade, and that where he excels is in the pass rush. So I see a strong floor with a player that I think is not quite done developing at just 20 years old. I think that his upside is really, really strong, and one of the stronger guys in terms of ceiling, like room that I think he has to grow. I think Michael Hall may come in first on this list, frankly.
Yeah, I think he has that potential. However, like you said, size is a concern for me.
It is.
When watching on tape, I think the one thing that I have to definitely point out is that when he gets low and tries to initiate that block, and his anchor point is just not there right now. And I think that's one of the biggest points of his game. But also, you talk about his great pass rush win rate numbers and things like that, but still just 29 pressures and 2 sacks in 2023. And for me personally, I think that the opportunity for him to develop into a true stud is there. However, when I was watching a lot of the tape, my eyes started to wander to the other 5 or 6 really good Ohio State players who are going to be in the top 100.
Don't worry about those guys, dude. Don't worry about it.
Next
he
year,
played with
right?
some good players. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it.
I think it is kind of a little bit of a big deal because it was a force multiplier for a lot of it for me personally.
He might be a cleanup merchant. There's a chance, but I'm banking on that not being the case. I think because I'll let you go on, but I have a small rebuttal to this.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'll let you. That's my main reason why it's not. I see what you saw on tape. For me personally, though, I just wonder how much of it factors in at the next level, and if he can take that next step on his own.
Yeah, so like you said, there's a chance he's a cleanup artist because he was. You look at the 2025 draft boards, and again, it's way too early, but it's like the entire Ohio State defensive line is in the top 15 picks or something, or top 10. It's a lot of them. They're very strong players, and so he was playing around some very talented guys. So there's a chance that he's a bit of a cleanup artist in that way. The reason why I'm not buying that until I see it in the NFL is because when I watched on tape him and like just tried to compare the impact on the plays that he was having to the players around him, I felt like he looked like he belonged. Does that make sense? Like it wasn't like I felt like, wow, he's only getting away with this because look at this guy taking on the double team over here. Or look at how quick this guy got around the edge over here. I felt like he was pulling his weight, doing his part on that line. And for that reason, I think that, maybe, if here's the concession. If you're going to go make him your marquee guy on the inside, it's probably not going to work out super well for you, especially early. And at his size, you're not going to really want to do that anyways. He's not that guy. And that's why he's number 7 on my list and 9 on JT's. But is he a great force multiplier that you can add as a Robin to somebody's Batman, add as the 3, as a rotational player who's going to come in and be the fresh body in the third quarter? I think that upside is there. And that's the reason why I have him at 7.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that. Once again, the athletic scores, the athletic build for him. There's a lot of good things going for him. I just wonder if he can take his technique and what he's learned to the next level where things just get a whole lot, heck of a lot more difficult very, very fast.
Sure. All right, let's keep the train rolling. At number 6, I have Chris Jenkins, defensive tackle out of Michigan. Where was he on your list, JT?
He also was 6. I tossed around Chris Jenkins all the way from not being on my board to 5 to 7, but I ultimately landed on 6.
So let me ask you about this, because earlier today when you were researching, I'm assuming this is when you were researching Chris Jenkins, because you shot me a text asking about him. You said, hey, what am I missing about Chris Jenkins besides he's freaky athletic, freaky strong? He was on Bruce Feldman's freak lists at the beginning of the year, but that's kind of it. Like, what else is there? Clearly you found something else because you have him at 6. What changed your mind about that?
I mean, I've watched a couple of his games, and I continue to just go back and forth. He's like my Xavier Legette of the defensive tackles. I think that is where I put him. There's a lot of reps where I really, really like what he puts on tape, and then there's a lot of reps like in the Rose Bowl game where it's just an absolute dud. And I it's hard for me to see where he can really excel at the next level, but even though he has the tools to do it, if that makes sense, right?
Sure.
Probably, I think, like you said, on Bruce Feldman's freak list, I think he was number 6. He's maybe the strongest player in the class. He has
I think it's JC Latham, but I think he's a very strong. Like I would. I'd love to see them go at it in an arm wrestling match. Is what I'd like to see between those two. Yeah, I don't know who I'd put money on. I probably would just enjoy and watch, to be honest.
And
I'm
not
think sure.
Where he really excels is the technical ability. I think his bull rush and his bull rush abilities and that power he uses ineffectively and not to the best of his abilities. Whereas I think with that power and the technical abilities in his other moves to get to the passer, I think work a lot better for him. So I think right now he has a lot of good things going for him. And I put him at 6 because I think he can go a heck of a lot higher if he can use some of that power to his advantage in more of a bull rush in getting to the passer effectively that way.
I can concede that you're banking on some of the flashes from him because production wise, I think he finished his entire career at Michigan with something like 44 total. 44 pressures and 4 sacks in his career. So like you're not banking on this guy just rolling over what he did in college to the NFL. You're banking on him taking another step, shifting into a gear or two above where he was at. The athleticism is strong. 94th percentile broad jump, 87th percentile 40-yard dash, 75th percentile 10-yard split. Those are parts of the things that you're banking on. Anyway, 6'2" and 3/4, just under 300 pounds. I am with you that there were times that he concerned me and I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I saw flashes from him in his best moments that I wasn't seeing from the guys we've mentioned previously on this list. Does that make sense? The ceiling moments from him, I felt like, whoa, if the right team, if the right coaching staff can distill that out of that guy, then that's worthy of number 6 on my list.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There's a couple that come to mind, potentially going to the Los Angeles Rams and putting him next to Kobe Turner or something like that. That was one where I think they could really get something really good out of him. And that's why I think he is currently rated pretty high on people's boards and on the consensus board. I think he's a top 50 player on the consensus board, if I believe my math checks out on that one. But yeah, I think he's got a lot. I think he's got a lot of good traits going for him.
All right, let's go to number 5. And I've got at number 5 a guy that I like a lot. I'll be honest, he was in the look. We got a graphic form and everything. Good producing, JT. Ruhnke from Clemson. Ruhnke O from Clemson.
You're not going to try? You're not going to try?
Let me try. Hang on. Let me try. Let me think about this for a minute. Man, and usually I'm so on my P's and Q's with pronunciation with these guys. Is it Ruhnke or
It's Ruhnke. Wait, now I had it in my head. I had it. Yeah, sure? I do.
Did I just mess you up?
Yeah, you did. You did.
Horo.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
Ruhnke or Horo. Okay. Out of
Close
Clemson.
enough.
That's Ruhnke O from Clemson. Like I said, he's number 5 defensive tackle on this list. He's somebody that was put on, I think, on both of our radars by our buddy Stoney Keeley, who's a big Ruhnke fan. And we were texting with him a couple weeks ago about him, and it made me like go and actually. I went out of my order for watching tape, and I was like, let's watch some Ruhnke, and I was very impressed. So that's why comes in at number 5 for me. He is. Let me pull up the numbers here. Me doing very good job here, filling dead air. He is 295 pounds, 6'4", versatile inside player. I think he's got a really high floor, one of the highest floors on this list. He played at edge when he joined Clemson, but he since bulked up, went from 265 to 290 to play inside, and that transition worked really well for him. JT, there's some technical things that I think he can get better at the NFL level. When he wins as a pass rusher, it's impressive, but the different ways in which he wins is somewhat limited. So I think adding to that bag of tricks at the NFL level is going to serve him well, and that's going to allow him to be an even better player than he was in college. But when he did win, an 8.7% pass rush win rate, very strong run defender as well. And that's the biggest reason why he's number 6 or 5. What are we on 5? Number 5 on my list is because he's the first guy that is a very strong run and pass defender in this group for me. He's a guy that I think has actual 3-down versatility in that way. Will he start there? No, I'd imagine he comes in as a rotational player at first, but I think he has the upside, the first guy on this list that has that true reasonable to expect upside of being a 3-down player, because he is really good at stopping the run and getting after the quarterback.
Yeah, I think my best comp for when I watch him is like a Volkswagen, he's very reliable, right? But
sure.
If you think of it maybe as like a family car as well, gets you to point A to point B really fast, really reliably. However,
gets the job done, functional, not necessarily sexy.
It gets the job done. However, if
you're never worried about it.
If you want to crank that son of a gun up to 10 on the highway and you're feeling frisky, you still can. You still have the versatility to do that.
You can get after it.
That's where my mind takes me when I watched him. I think the athletic testing as well, when watching him at the combine, tested really well. One of the more athletic, I think, guys in this defensive lineman group. So he has a lot going for him in that aspect, but like you said, there's a lot of technical things where he wins, but he still needs to improve on those to really become a 3-down player at the next level.
And because he's kind of a tweener in terms of size, only 21st percentile for an interior player, 72nd percentile for height, though, at 6'4". So he's got the height. He's just a little bit more of a string bean than most of the guys he's playing with on the interior. That tweener status gives him the upper hand in terms of athleticism, right? 95th percentile broad, 80th percentile vertical, 89th percentile 40-yard dash, 89th percentile 10-yard split. The guy's a freak in terms of an inside athlete. And so I think that ability to be a technician at the next level, if he goes to the right team, learns from the right coaches, and adds that bag of tricks, I think that's going to serve him well. And again, he's not going to be your 3 tech, your nose tackle, your run stuffer in that way, but perfectly serviceable at that size.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's move on to your number 4 here, which I think we had a little bit of a difference, but you ultimately landed on someone who I think is one of the more polarizing prospects in this draft class.
So yeah, Braden Fisk, defensive tackle out of Florida State. Is he your number 3, or is he even higher on your list?
I believe he is my 5, and then
I see.
And then Ruhnke is my 4. So
gotcha. Okay, so flipping these two. Gotcha. Yeah, listen, this guy popped onto the scene at the combine because he was 87th percentile or better in every single movement drill. He's an elite combine performer, at least, and an elite athlete in that way. And I want to pull up his exact numbers here. But the reason why, and a lot of people will tell you he's their second, third defensive tackle in this class. The reason why I'm just not sold is, first of all, he's not very big, 290, 6'3", same exact body type, essentially, to a Ruhnke or but he's considered to be a significantly higher ceiling player because of that athleticism. It's a very similar athletic profile to a guy like Ruhnke. And so that's why I don't, I'm looking at the consensus board here. Ruhnke comes in at 72 and Braden Fisk comes in at 41. And that, I just don't think that that's appropriate. I don't think they're that different of players, that one is like a high end 2nd round pick and one is a middle of the 3rd round pick. But that's not to put down Braden Fisk as much as to say I think folks are just a little bit high on him. I do like him as a potential 3-down player. He's got a crazy high motor, very maximum effort on every single play. He's strong in the stunt game. I like a lot of what he does. I think his athletic testing in this draft cycle process has just inflated him a little bit. Is that fair? I imagine you agree based on where you have him.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say there's something that Orhorhoro has that Fisk does not, and that is arm length. I mean, yes. Braden Fisk has T-Rex arms. If T-Rex
3rd percentile arms
could be T-Rex arms, and I think that is something.
If T-Rex arms were T-Rex arms, he'd
like
have
the T-Rexiest of T-Rex arms.
Gotcha. Sure.
My comp then. You could take it one step further. Meet the Robinsons in the T-Rex and Meet the Robinsons. Yeah, that's Braden Fisk right there for you. Big body, little super itty bitty tiny arms, and I think that is one of the biggest threats to his potential at the next level. Being able to reach out and make solid contact at the next level when you're going up against guys who just have absolute super long arms. I think that's something that he's going to have to battle, and why maybe I'm with you that these two should be a little closer than the consensus may put them.
Yeah, I want to be clear. We sound like we're low on the guy. We're not. We think he's the 4th or 5th best pass rusher in this class. So maybe we should say some nice things like, while the measurements aren't ideal, he's got really strong football IQ. Again, like I said, I think he's really strong in the stunt game. He's freaky athletic, has a crazy high motor. Those are all the traits that you're betting on when you take him in the 2nd or 3rd round. And so I think he's worth a dart throw in the 3rd round, but I probably wouldn't take him higher than the 3rd.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think middle of day 3 is where I would probably potentially start to look at him.
All right, we're on to the top 3 here, right?
Yes.
So we have the same 3 guys in the top 3, if not the right order.
Correct.
So I have. Let's just go ahead and lay it out there. I have Tavondre Sweat as my 3rd tackle in this class. Byron Murphy, his teammate out of Texas, at number 2, and Jerzon Johnny Newton at number 1. What's the order that you have them in?
I'm basically the same. Except I have Newton and Byron flipped, but
Okay, so
very
Byron
close.
is your
Very,
one,
very
Newton is your two.
close. Yes.
Okay, so we agree these are the top three guys. On the consensus board, they are at 56, 26, and 17. So these are all guys that are, one or maybe two slip into that first round, but they're all going to be gone by the middle of the second round. And with that, let's dive into let's start with T'Vondre Sweat. The news came down today that he was arrested I don't know if it was today or last night or when, but in the last 24 hours, he was arrested with a DUI in I think I don't know where, in Texas, I'm assuming. It was reported by who said, it's Dane Brugler from The Athletic, saying on Twitter that from a team source, he heard that T'Vondre Sweat was very upfront with teams when he met with them, saying that as an underclassman, he was big into the party scene, was an irresponsible kid, and that's he was honest about that, and he made it a point of emphasis that is behind him, that he is becoming a professional, becoming a big boy. This doesn't look great in that regard. And I don't want this to be the defining characteristic for this guy. But man, you had 3 weeks before the draft and you just cost yourself a lot of money, because he's a really, really strong player, somebody that you and I fell in love with at the combine and have not looked back since. A handful of folks that push back on T'Vondre Sweat as somebody that they think can't be a 3-down player. I totally disagree. I'd imagine you totally disagree based on where you have him in this list, just because he is one of the biggest players in this entire draft class. And boy, is this a big fella. Pulling up the exact numbers here. Yeah, 6'4", 362. And I'd imagine he plays at all of those 362 pounds. You can't teach that size, man. He is a space eater. He's a black hole in the middle of the defensive line. And he's athletic enough to not just be a road bump for offensive lines and for running backs trying to come down the middle. He's got versatility, strong athlete. He played 5 years in college, 62 games, a lot of production in those games. Last year, 26 hurries, 3 hits, 2 sacks. Elite pass rush and run defense grades from PFF down the board. His run defense grade, his run stop rate, his true pass set, pass rush grade, pass rush win rate, all of these things. 15.3% pass rush win rate. When he is sent, he gets after it and gets home at a high clip. I like a lot about him. I just question whether or not he's the kind of guy you want on your team, frankly, based on what we heard today.
Yeah, Kenneth in the comments chimes in and says, I'd be willing to bet Sweat doesn't fall due to his DUI anymore than he already would. Second round lock for him. Personally, I think, if you look at a guy like Laramie Tunsil,
notorious Texas fan, if we're being 100% fair.
True.
Here, but
I think that if you look at a guy like Laramie Tunsil and saw how far he fell, this can pretty much go the same way. I think he's not a player like you would treat like a Jalen Carter. I think he wasn't the most elite at his position. And I think there are more question marks about him than there were about a Jalen Carter last year. However, I do think that he still provides enough value that there is a team that will probably take him in the 3rd round, late day 3. However, if he were to fall to the Titans in that early day 4, that is a home run pick in my opinion.
Round 4, but we know what you mean. Yeah, I don't see it, man. I am with Kenneth in the sense that I will be really surprised if he is not gone in the 2nd or 3rd round. I'm not there. I'm with you that if he is, by some grace of God, or at that point, maybe I am a little bit concerned about what the teams feel about him as a character concern. But in terms of the athlete, the player profile, a 4th round pick that is T'Vondre Sweat is ridiculous. That's bonkers. I love that so much. I don't think it's going to happen personally.
Yeah, it would be tough for it to happen. Now, if we're looking at him at the 38th pick, early day 2, I don't know if that also moves the needle either. But nonetheless, just talking about
can we talk about that real quick? I'm not crazy about him at 38. But that's not because I wouldn't like his value at 38 for this team. I'd be fine with the pick. The reason why I wouldn't be crazy about it is because I anticipate there being at least 3 or 4 or 5 different players available at 38 along with him, hypothetically, that I would prefer. So it's less about liking him. I would be perfectly happy with him at 38, as long as the team is confident that he's not a concern as a human being. It wouldn't be my top pick.
maybe putting him in Nashville isn't the greatest idea. Maybe who's to say?
There's not
Um,
a party. It's not a party town at all. People are
I
in
don't
their
think so.
beds by 8 p.m. every evening, tucked
Correct.
in with their nightcap,
Hmm.
just honk shoeing away. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you want to
nothing
talk more
more.
about the player before we move on? Like,
I mean,
what is
yeah,
it you love about the
I
guy
was gonna say.
aside
I
from
mean,
the DUI?
he was a guy that immediately when we got to the Senior Bowl. I mean, when you talk about going up against a different player every single rep at the Senior Bowl and then consistently continuing to win, that is who he is. He uses his power to his advantage in those situations and continues to come out on top no matter what. He's a guy that if you put him in the middle of that line there, next to a all-star caliber tackle like a Jeffrey Simmons, I mean, that is a dynamic duo that could just absolutely wreck your offensive line. Having that type of size paired with the speed of a Jeffrey Simmons or another star player like that is a 1-2 punch combo that you rarely find, right? Because of his ability to be so strong and yet still so fluid. I mean, we're talking about him basically running the same 40 that we would run, right? Or maybe even better.
We don't
And
need to talk
he's
about
over
that. That's not a
250
detail you
pounds.
should have brought up
He's
personally. I
like
don't think that
250
was
pounds
necessary.
heavier, you know? I'm not saying that's a knock on us. I'm just saying
I mean, it is a knock on us pretty objectively, but yeah, no, I mean, it's a credit to him. That's fair.
he ran like a
you know,
5'2". I think that's pretty acceptable.
for a average, slightly out of weight person like me, then yeah, I agree. Out of weight, out of shape. What was I going to say? Oh, the thing that I like, one of the biggest reasons I would love him in this Tennessee system is because he would essentially be filling the role that Tier Tart did, and I was a huge fan of what a Simmons Tart 1-2 punch was. I think that a guy like Sweat has a much stronger pass rush profile, pass rush upside than a I said his name and now I'm blanking it. Yeah, Tier Tart. Thank you. Than a Tier Tart had. And so that's the reason why I think I would not love him in the 30, in the late 30s for every single team. But for the Titans, I quite like the idea of somebody like him on this team. If it came at 38, I would be fine with it. But there are two other players in this defensive tackle group that I like more. And so let's get to those guys. Let's talk about Byron Murphy, his teammate at Texas, who is my number 2 tackle, your number 1 tackle. This is a strong athlete. I believe on the consensus board, he's at 17. So he's the only guy that, based on consensus, is expected to be a first-round pick. Would not shock me at all. Had a 19.6% pass rush win rate, which led all defensive linemen in 2023. He's your number 1 guy. So what's your favorite thing about this guy? What puts him over the top for you?
He is bar none the best athlete out of this group. And I think that his ability to continue to put up numbers, being the best athlete in this group, makes him the number 1 overall. I mean, he had a 19.6% pass rush win rate last year, even next to a guy like Tavondre Sweat, who was a game wrecker in his own. He has all the technical tools to be a 3-down blocker or a 3-down player, no matter what. And I think that when you get him on your team and put him into the right system, I think he has that superstar potential because of just how good of an athlete he is. And I think when we talk about a guy like Jalen Carter last year, I think he also fits that bill pretty closely just because of the athlete that he is in the way that he plays.
He was the Jeffrey Simmons Tier Tart comp. He was the Batman to Sweat's Robin. Very different size player. Just over 6 foot, 297 pounds. But as an athlete, like you said, very, very strong. 82nd percentile broad, 88th percentile vert, 91st percentile 40-yard dash, 83rd percentile 10-yard split. Really, really strong, gifted player. I like him a lot. There's very little reason why I would be displeased with a team taking him in the late first round. I think the athletic profile, the production in college, very, very strong. That college production paired with that athleticism. I saw our buddy James, I think, comped him to a Jarrell Casey. I think that's a very, very strong comparison that I like a lot. So I think he does it all well. He's got good technique, ability to get after the run and the pass. I don't see a lot of flaws with this player.
Yeah, I think right. It's one of those when you get into the territory of saying can't miss, right? It's he's if there is one guy that you want to bet on to win in at the next level and succeed no matter what, Byron Murphy I think is that prospect who checks all the boxes. You know what you're getting in this guy. I think he's a guy who really you can plug and play and can be a playmaker from day one.
All right, so my number one defensive tackle in this class, and your number two is Jerzon Johnny Newton out of Illinois. The reason why I have Newton higher than a Murphy is because I think that of this group, he is easily the number one most polished player. I think that he is, if you're looking for NFL ready, that's Johnny Newton to me. 295 pounds, 6'2", junior last year, 21 years old. There are some physical limitations, right? Not the biggest guy, not the tallest guy, but as an athlete, incredibly, and I'm wondering on if he mock draftable if he's in here as Jerzon. Yes, he is. I hate the small pet peeve. I hate how in the draft a lot of guys have nicknames, and half of them the internet recognizes, and the other half the internet just doesn't refuses to accept. Do you know what I'm talking about? Is I don't know what to if I'm looking for Tank Dell or Nathaniel Dell, I'm looking for Jerzon Newton or Johnny Newton. Apparently the internet thinks he's still Jerzon, even though he prefers to go by Johnny. Regardless, I think that on tape, you see everything that you want from a guy that is plug and play from college to the NFL. Hand usage, pass rush tools, block shedding ability, all of these things. I think he's could be a 3 technique, could be a 5 tech, versatile on the interior in that way. He was the 2023 Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. I like him. I like him a lot. If you're looking for one knock, he's not the quickest player in the world, but man, is he strong, and he's got decent enough size that I think he just makes up for it with brute force.
Yeah, it's hard for me to find a con in both of these guys' games. It's really up to preference whether you want the elite athlete who can just get off every single time and make a play, or do you want
and
the
I want to I just want to clarify. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but his get off is really, really strong.
yeah
He's a quick. I think I just said it backwards. He is a quick player, not a fast player. In from what I've seen on tape, and that's what I like a lot from him because that lends itself to the pass rush ability, right?
yeah, and that's with him, right? He has the technical tools. He has a very diverse move set. So it really is just pick your flavor of defensive linemen between Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton. Johnny Newton definitely has the more diverse move set when it comes to playing the position. But like you said, he's not the most gifted athlete in the world. Certainly not next to maybe a guy like Byron Murphy in that aspect.
All right, that's our list. We covered 12 guys in total, I think. We had Christian Boyd out of Northern Illinois, Dwayne Carter out of Duke, Mekhi Wingo out of LSU, Brandon Dorless out of Oregon, Michael Hall Jr. out of Ohio State, Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, Ruhnke Orhoro out of Clemson, Braden Fisk out of Florida State, T'Vondre Sweat out of Texas, Byron Murphy out of Texas, and Jerzon Johnny Newton out of Illinois. And that is our show. Folks, I promise these just get better and more entertaining as we go. We try to get the more technical, I don't want to say boring, because they're not boring to us, and they're clearly not boring to you because you're still here listening to us. But, you know, the sexy positions, running back, a wide receiver, quarterback, offensive tackle is very sexy to me into these Titans this year in particular. Those guys are coming up down the tracks. We've got a lot of awesome guests. Austin Gale from The Ringer will be with us again for the wide receiver list. And I know he's done a lot of work on these wide receivers, so I'm stoked for that one. Our buddy Stoney joining us for the interior offensive line and the tackle lists. All of those things. We've got our favorite quarterback expert in the world coming to join us for the quarterback episode, who is going to give us an update on Malik Willis and Will Levis, who he's been working out with a lot recently. All of those things coming down the pike in the next 2 weeks or so. So make sure you're tuned in to All Things Hot Read Podcast. We'll be going at least on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, having shows drop. If you want to check the live version of those shows, they're always the evening before, right? So Sunday night, like we are here, Tuesday night, Thursday night. We would love for you guys to tune in with us live and comment along. Until Tuesday, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the top 10 defensive tackles in the 2024 NFL draft class. We'll get some more positions coming down the pike this week. We'll talk to you then.